Hello! I am Mac, at least for a day, and everything's going to be okay. I'm on creative mode in case you're wondering why my character looks different. And on this No Man's Sky speculation video, I would like to discuss Mega-Fauna, or exotic Mega-Fauna, as I am going to call them in this video. And that is referring to things like sandworms and space whales, really big, bizarre creatures that people have been asking for. Now, first let's talk about sandworms. Of course, sandworms were first teased in the very first trailer of No Man's Sky, and of course, because of that, people have been speculating about it for ages. And just recently, we finally got some actual word from Sean Murray about it. When he was doing a bunch of interviews before the next update came out, he mentioned that the sandworm thing was something that they had considered and that they wanted to do. That's why it was in the old trailer. And he said that when they tested it, it ended up being a thing that wouldn't have been good for the game because the sandworms were just too big, too powerful. They would have just been something that would pass by and like just destroyed players and things. He didn't say there was anything wrong with them from a technical standpoint, so I guess it would be possible to put them in the game, but he said it just wouldn't be good because you'd have just this giant thing going by that players wouldn't be able to do anything about. Like, I don't know if it would just like knock us away, or it would kill us instantly, or it would just be so big as to, I don't know. But so honestly, for a long time I didn't like the whole sandworm topic. I thought that it was something that was never going to come, and it was just something they decided not to do. The reason I thought they were never going to do it was from a technical standpoint. I thought that it just wasn't possible for them to add such gigantic creatures, that it would just cause an incredible amount of lag and cause the game to crash. Sean Murray didn't mention that, he just said that it wouldn't be good for gameplay. And when he said that, that got me really excited and happy, because I thought finally people are going to stop speculating about sandworms and we can just stop arguing and talking about it. Unfortunately, right after that, after Next came out, there were files found in the next update that said something in them like giant snake. And that got me really upset, because that means that people are going to keep speculating about it forever. So again, I don't know why that file is in there, why there's a file for giant snake. I don't think it contains any actual like character model, any kind of model for the giant snake. It's just a file that says giant snake. Why they put that in there? Is it like some old file that they used when they tried doing the snake? Which doesn't make sense why they would include it in the next update, because next update is supposed to be a totally new thing. But it also might be that they are actually planning on finally doing sandworms. Now, what I think would work is if they just added small snakes, which, as in small, I mean not incredibly giant like sandworms from the Dune universe, but basically we had those flying eels on planets. And Sean Murray actually said that. He said that the sandworms we decided to put in the sky instead of making them on land. But I don't see why they didn't just put them on land at the size they are, because they're not insanely huge. They're they are, you know, a reasonable size in the sky. I don't see why they couldn't put them on the ground and have them slither along the ground. Now, it could be a technical problem where it's hard to get them to slither along procedurally generated terrain, and it's much easier just to have them floating in the sky. But I don't know. But the fact that they included that giant snake thing does open the possibility that they might be planning to do that. Another possibility, though, is after that giant snake file appeared in the game, we got the Abyss update, and in the Abyss update we got the Abyssal Horrors, and the Abyssal Horrors, specifically the eyeball thing, looks kind of like a snake. It looks kind of like a giant snake with a giant eyeball. People are probably going to get mad at me for saying this, but it is possible that that's what they were talking about, or that's what they were starting to work on. And so the Abyssal Horrors are actually the giant snakes. They're giant snakes underwater. They're not really long, but they are kind of snake-shaped with a giant eyeball. So maybe that's actually what the giant snakes were, and so now we've already got giant snakes underwater now, which they don't really move like snakes. They're more like plants that stay in one spot and pull you in with their eyeball. But maybe that's actually what it was. So maybe we're not going to get any other type of giant snake, and that's what the Abyssal Horrors are. But if I'm wrong, maybe eventually they will add something. It would be cool if they would just, you know, put the snakes that we have floating in the sky on the ground and figure out a way to make them able to slither along the ground. I have seen mods where people have done that. They've put the floating snakes on the ground, and they look kind of janky because as they slither around the procedural terrain, like the terrain I'm showing right here, you can kind of imagine them trying to slither along this path, and like their tail kind of bounces around and looks all weird and buggy. So I think you can kind of imagine that's probably what it would be like, and I guess they probably don't want to put that in the game if it's going to look really janky and buggy and not look good, not look like an actual snake slithering smoothly along the terrain. So that might be why they've never added any kind of slithering creature. We've got creatures that walk, creatures that fly, creatures that swim, but we don't have creatures that slither along the ground. And whether they're going to end up adding those or not, I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to get really giant sandworms, because Sean Murray said that it wouldn't be good for gameplay, and I think from a technical standpoint it wouldn't work well. It would cause too much lag to make things that are actually as big as they are in the Dune universe. In the Dune universe, sandworms are like, it's difficult to describe, but they're insanely huge, like as big as a freighter almost. Maybe not quite that big, but they're incredibly huge. And I don't think it would be possible for them to make something that big on a planet's surface. And Sean Murray has basically said they're not going to do that. But whether they plan to ever add smaller snake or slithering creatures, I don't know. So moving on, let's talk about space whales. Space whales are not something Hello Game has ever hinted at, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's ever been anything found in the files that implies they're ever going to make a deep space creature that floats in space. But it is something that people have been asking for since the very beginning of No Man's Sky when it was announced. And yeah, but there's never been anything in trailers, there's never been any hint from Hello Games that they would ever add anything like that. But it is a really cool idea to have some kind of giant living creature in space. Now, as always, I'm going to poke holes in it and say that it might not be possible. For one thing, we don't have any large moving objects in space. All large objects are stationary, like freighters. Freighters warp in, but that's just an animation. They never actually move from the spot once they appear. Freighters and the smaller frigates never ever move. The only moving thing we have in space are the little bitty spaceships that we fly in. So those can move, but the really, really big things cannot move. Space stations never move, Atlas stations, the space anomaly warps in also, but it never moves once it appears. Planets don't move, which we're going to talk about in another video. But yeah, no large objects move, with the exception of the sun, or the star of a star system. It moves, but it's technically not an object. People have proven that you can't fly to it. It's not an actual object in the game. It's basically a part of the skybox that moves around in order to make the illusion of a day-night cycle. So there's no really big objects that move in space. So the idea of space whales is that we'd have these huge, gigantic living creatures, quote-unquote, swimming in space. Of course, I think that would be really awesome. In fact, I would like to take it a step further and say I would like Lovecraftian monstrosities in space. I love that idea that, so like Cthulhu and other beings supposedly came from space and came to Earth before humans existed and are now sleeping here on Earth. I think the idea is that they didn't come here on spaceships, they just flew here. They're giant, super powerful creatures that can exist in the vacuum of space and have some way of propelling themselves through space. Obviously, swimming with fins or tentacles wouldn't really work in space because there's no air. You can't move against the current because there's nothing to move against. You'd have to have some way of propelling yourself, maybe shooting ink to propel yourself if you're a giant octopus creature. But that would be really awesome. And honestly, I want there to be a sci-fi movie or a sci-fi game that has giant tentacle creatures floating out in space. And there have been some things like that, I think. I think Elite Dangerous has a alien race. I forget the name. Someone's gonna say it in the comments, but there's this alien race in Elite Dangerous that there's this one part where you can encounter them and they look like some kind of giant creature in space. So yeah, and another example would be the bugs from Starship Troopers. I think the bugs have their own organic ships, like giant bugs that they ride inside of. Just that idea of a really unique alien race that flies through space in organic ships, in living ships, rather than just the same metal freighters that we have throughout the No Man's Sky universe. That would be really cool. And I don't know if they'll ever do that. They did in the survey, and this is kind of unrelated, but in the survey they did put as an option more NPC variety. We don't know what they meant by that. That could just mean more hats and outfits for all of the NPCs to have, but it could also mean they want to add more NPC races. It would be kind of hard to do that with the lore, because all of the lore revolves around the three main races, Vy'keen, Gek, and Korvax, and then the Travelers are something weird and anomalous that just appeared. Which I guess they could do that with another new race. They could make a new race that like appears from another dimension all of a sudden and suddenly becomes a part of the game. And they could be a new enemy. That would be really awesome if there were living ships and this new evil alien race that appears and becomes a threat. But I mean, I'm just throwing out crazy ideas at this point. There's no indication that they're gonna do anything like that, but that is something that I would like to see. I would like to see a really bizarre new alien race that has technology unlike the other races, because it's kind of dumb that Vy'keen, Korvax, and Gek all use the same freighters. There's a few different styles of freighters, but I think all the races can use each type. And of course there's different ships which kind of go along with each race. Haulers are for Gek, explorers are for Korvax, fighters are for Viking, and I guess exotic is for travelers, and then shuttles are just garbage that everybody uses. But technically every race uses every type of ship, because every type of ship is in a star system, even though a star system only has one race in it. So they all fly every type of ship, but the different classes of ship are kind of designed with the certain races in mind. So yeah, I'm getting off on a crazy tangent, but that's something I would like to see is some kind of organic spaceships or organic thing in space. But again, that may not be possible for them to have giant moving objects in space. Like space whales, going back to the original topic, space whales probably would not be possible so long as the engine doesn't support giant moving things. And the reason I think that it does not is, I don't want to misquote him, but I think it was Rayrod. Rayrod is a pretty popular modder in the No Man's Sky community. It was either him or someone else in the modding community that said, because people asked them, why can't you add giant flying creatures in space? And they said that space is totally different in No Man's Sky, that the physics work totally different, and it's just not possible to add assets that don't belong in space, at least currently. Modders are not able to do that. I have seen a really cool mod, I believe Space Pirate TV showed it on his channel. It was the snakes and eels that we already have in the sky. He made them really giant, so it almost looked like space whales. It looked like gigantic, almost whale-like creatures floating in the sky, but they were not in space. They looked like they were in space if you take a screenshot of them at night, and then it looks like they're floating in the night sky, but they were actually in the atmosphere of the planet. And so apparently it's not possible to put those assets into space because the physics works different in space and all of that. So that's why I don't think it would be possible for Hello Games to put moving objects or moving creatures in space, with the exception of the tiny little ships that we fly in. But the giant freighters and all that have never moved, and I don't think they ever will. Again, I could be wrong. They might be able to change the physics engine, but I really don't know. And like I said in the last video, they never have changed the physics of the game. I'm pretty sure the underlying physics have all stayed the same. We've just gotten new assets, base building stuff, lore, storyline, objectives, user interface, etc., etc., but no actual physics in the game have changes. That's why we've never gotten planets with lower gravity. Whoa, no, that's not true. Sorry, I'm forgetting. Low atmosphere planets have a different kind of gravity now, so they were able to change that. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they can change the physics. I forgot about that they were able to change basically the gravity on empty planets. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they can change the physics, but I don't know if giant moving objects in space would be possible, because again, it could be too much lag. But anyway, I've rambled on enough about it. I want you all to comment and tell me, do you think space whales and sandworms are possible, and will we see them in some form or another? And what other exotic megafauna, to create that term, would you like to see? What other gigantic, crazy creatures would you like to see? People have said things like giant sea creatures, which supposedly are in the game. We've got the giant anglerfish things that appear, that we got in the Abyss update, but somebody told me there was some other giant whale-like creatures besides the shark things that we've already had. But I've never been able to find those. But that's another thing, is giant sea creatures, which would be really cool. And there's probably other exotic megafauna on land that people can think of. So let me know if you think Hello Games will finally answer all the people that have been wanting these things and actually add them to the game in some form or another. And what would you personally like to see as far as giant crazy creatures? So I've been Mac. Thank you for joining me for a day. And remember, everything is going to be okay.